In the heart of the Sahel, a diplomatic crisis is brewing, one with far-reaching implications for Ukraine and its standing on the global stage. At the center of this unfolding drama lies Ukraine's ill-fated involvement in the complex internal conflict plaguing Mali. What began as an attempt to counter Russian influence through the Wagner Group has backfired spectacularly, leaving Ukraine facing criticism and accusations of violating Mali's sovereignty. This diplomatic row has cast a long shadow over Ukraine's efforts to garner international support in its own struggle against Russian aggression. The crisis in Mali is a stark reminder of the complexities and sensitivities that characterize the international system, particularly in regions grappling with instability and conflict. For Ukraine, a nation fighting for its very survival against a formidable adversary, the stakes could not be higher. Ukraine's involvement in Mali can be traced back to its determination to counter the growing influence of Russia, particularly through the Wagner Group's activities in the region. The Wagner Group, a private military company with close ties to the Kremlin, has been expanding its footprint in Africa, raising alarms in Kiev. Believing that undermining the Wagner Group would deal a blow to Russia's strategic interests, Ukraine made the fateful decision to provide support to armed groups opposed to the Malian government and their Russian allies. This move was seen as a strategic gamble by Kiev, hoping to weaken Russian influence indirectly. The Malian government, outraged by what it perceived as a blatant violation of its sovereignty, took decisive action. It viewed Ukraine's interference as an unacceptable breach of international norms. It severed diplomatic ties with Ukraine, expelled Ukrainian diplomats, and made it clear that such actions would not be tolerated. The Malian government launched a scathing public condemnation of Kiev's actions, accusing Ukraine of destabilizing the region. Many African nations, already wary of external interference in their affairs, expressed solidarity with Mali and criticized Ukraine for its actions. This collective stance by African nations further isolated Ukraine diplomatically. The crisis in Mali quickly snowballed into a major diplomatic headache for Ukraine, undermining its efforts to build bridges with African nations. Kiev's miscalculation not only strained its relations with Mali, but also cast a shadow over its broader diplomatic initiatives in the continent. The backlash against Ukraine's actions in Mali was swift and widespread, exposing a deep-seated mistrust of external interference in African affairs. Many African nations, harboring vivid memories of colonialism and Cold War meddling, viewed Ukraine's support for Malian rebels as a dangerous precedent. This perception was further fueled by Russia's propaganda machine, which seized on the opportunity to portray Ukraine as a reckless actor. The crisis in Mali also exposed the limits of international solidarity with Ukraine. The global backlash against Ukraine's actions in Mali highlights the importance of soft power, diplomacy, and building trust in international relations. Ukraine's fixation on countering the Wagner Group in Africa, while understandable, has proven to be a costly and counterproductive strategy. By prioritizing the Wagner Group as its primary adversary in Africa, Ukraine has allowed itself to be drawn into local conflicts that have little to do with its own national security interests. This obsession with the Wagner Group has blinded Ukraine to the nuances and complexities of the African security landscape. By portraying itself as a victim of Ukrainian aggression in Africa, Russia has been able to garner sympathy and support from some African nations. By overestimating the Wagner Group's importance, Ukraine has fallen into a trap of its own making. Section 5. Ghosts of the Past. The Cold War's enduring legacy in Africa. The crisis in Mali is a stark reminder of the Cold War's enduring legacy in Africa. For decades, the continent served as a battleground for proxy wars between the United States and the Soviet Union, each superpower vying for influence and control. These Cold War rivalries fueled internal conflicts, propped up dictators, and left a legacy of instability and mistrust that continues to haunt the region today. Ukraine's actions in Mali have evoked uncomfortable parallels to the Cold War era, when external powers routinely interfered in African affairs. The Cold War may be over, but its ghosts continue to shape the geopolitical landscape in Africa. Section 6. Bridging the divide. Ukraine's uphill battle for African hearts and minds. In the aftermath of the Mali debacle, Ukraine faces an uphill battle to repair its damaged reputation and rebuild trust with African nations. The crisis has exposed a significant trust deficit, fueled by historical grievances and Russia's relentless disinformation campaign. Bridging this divide will require a concerted and sustained effort on Ukraine's part. Ukraine must move beyond the transactional nature of its previous engagement with Africa, which often focused on securing votes at the United Nations and countering Russian influence. Instead, it should strive to build partnerships based on shared values, mutual interests, and a commitment to addressing common challenges. Section 7. Sovereignty at stake. A fundamental principle undermined. At the heart of the crisis in Ukraine-Africa relations lies a fundamental principle of international law and diplomacy, the principle of sovereignty. Ukraine's decision to provide support to armed groups in Mali, regardless of its intentions, was widely perceived as a violation of this principle. It reinforced the perception that powerful states, even those claiming to be victims of aggression themselves, are willing to disregard the sovereignty of weaker nations when it suits their interests. This perception has been further reinforced by the double standards often applied in international affairs. The erosion of the principle of sovereignty has far-reaching consequences for international peace and security. Section 8. Charting a new course, the path to restoring trust and cooperation. To repair the damage caused by the crisis in Mali and rebuild trust with African nations, Ukraine must embark on a new course, one guided by the principles of diplomacy, mutual respect, and a genuine commitment to partnership. This new path requires a deep understanding of the historical context and the current geopolitical landscape. First and foremost, Ukraine must acknowledge the mistakes made in Mali and take concrete steps to repair the damage caused by its actions. This involves not only public apologies but also tangible actions that demonstrate a commitment to making amends. Second, Ukraine must engage in a sincere and sustained dialogue with African leaders to address their concerns and rebuild trust. This dialogue should be ongoing and involve multiple levels of engagement, from high-level summits to grassroots initiatives. This dialogue should be based on mutual respect, a willingness to listen, and a recognition of the shared challenges facing both Ukraine and African nations. It is essential to create an environment where all parties feel heard and valued. Third, Ukraine must develop a new framework for engagement with Africa, one that moves beyond the transactional nature of its previous interactions. This framework should focus on long-term partnerships, sustainable development, and mutual benefits, ensuring that both sides can prosper together. Section 9. Lessons learned. Navigating the complexities of international relations. The crisis in Ukraine-Africa relations offers a number of valuable lessons for Ukraine and the international community as a whole. These lessons, if heeded, can help prevent similar crises in the future and promote a more stable and cooperative international order. First, the crisis highlights the importance of understanding the historical context in which events unfold. Africa's experience with colonialism and Cold War meddling has left a deep legacy of mistrust towards external interference. Any engagement with African nations must be sensitive to this history and avoid actions that could be perceived as a return to the past. Section 10. A call for wisdom, the imperative of prudence and strategic foresight. As Ukraine navigates the complex terrain of international relations, it must be guided by the principles of prudence, strategic foresight, and a deep understanding of the interconnected nature of global affairs. This means not only reacting to immediate challenges, but also anticipating future trends and potential crises that could impact its national interests. The crisis in Africa, while a setback, also presents an opportunity for Ukraine to learn from its mistakes, recalibrate its foreign policy, and emerge as a more mature and responsible actor on the world stage. By analyzing the root causes of the crisis and engaging in constructive dialogue, Ukraine can develop more effective strategies for conflict resolution and international cooperation. The world is watching, and Ukraine's response to this crisis will be judged not only by its immediate actions, but also by its long-term commitment to the principles of international law, diplomacy, and mutual respect. Every decision made now will have lasting implications for its global standing and relationships. The path ahead will be challenging, but with wisdom, determination, and a steadfast commitment to its values, Ukraine can overcome this crisis and forge a new and more constructive relationship with Africa and the world. By fostering partnerships and building trust, Ukraine can pave the way for a more stable and prosperous future for all involved.
So hit that subscribe button, ring the bell for notifications, and let's turn the page on a new adventure together. Get ready to experience books like never before, only on VBook 360. Like, comment, and share to support the channel and keep the video magic alive. Thank you for stopping by. And remember, every video has a story, and every story deserves to be shared. See you in the next video.